Did you know Hollywood's most iconic tough guy had to stand on milk crates just to kiss his leading ladies? Or that the biggest box office star of the 1940s was so tiny his female co-stars wore flats and stood in trenches? Welcome to the hidden world of Golden Age heartthrobs who packed charisma into compact frames. These guys weren't just short by today's standards, they were literally looking up at the actresses who adored them on screen. 1. Alan Ladd. Alan Ladd wasn't just a noir legend with ice blue eyes and killer charisma. He was also Hollywood's most famous platform wearer. Standing at just 5 feet 6 inches, and some sources claim even that was generous, Ladd became a box office sensation, despite being drastically shorter than most of his glamorous co-stars. Studio execs were so paranoid about his height, they employed wild tricks to make him appear taller. When filming with 5 feet 8 inches Sophia Loren in Boy on a Dolphin, the director literally dug a trench for her to walk in when they shared scenes together. Ladd often stood on hidden boxes during kiss scenes, and set designers built raised walkways that let him tower over his leading ladies while cameras rolled. His partnership with 4 feet 11 inches Veronica Lake became legendary, partly because she was one of the few actresses actually shorter than him. Paramount deliberately paired them together in classics like This Gun for Hire and The Blue Dahlia, knowing their heights matched perfectly on screen. Film historian David Thompson once noted, Ladd created the cool tough guy act that everyone from Clint Eastwood to Ryan Gosling has been copying ever since, all while standing on a literal pedestal. Despite his stature, women found him irresistible. His wife Sue Carroll once remarked that his height just concentrated all that masculinity into a more compact package. And it worked. Ladd's films grossed millions when that really meant something. The man who started as a grip at Warner Brothers because they thought he was too blonde and too short, for acting became one of the highest paid stars of the 1940s. 2. Humphrey Bogart. Bogey may have been the epitome of tough guy cool, but at 5 feet 8 inches and likely closer to 5 feet 7 inches, he faced serious height challenges with his most glamorous co-stars. His iconic pairing with 5 feet 9 inches Ingrid Bergman in Casablanca required serious camera trickery to hide their height difference. During their famous final airport scene, Bogart stood on hidden blocks while Bergman was instructed to hunch slightly and tilt her head down. In their intimate sofa scenes, Bogey sat on an extra cushion to appear taller. According to set designers, he once wore 5-inch elevator shoes for a film, possibly setting a Hollywood height-boosting record that Tom Cruise might still be chasing. Bogart's wife and frequent co-star Lauren Bacall towered over him at 5 feet 8 inches, but studio publicity photos always showed them perfectly matched. Cinematographer Arthur Edison developed what became known as the Bogart Special, a camera angle that shot slightly upward at Humphrey, while catching his taller co-stars looking down adoringly. Film critic Roger Ebert once said, "What made Bogart magnetic wasn't height but presence. He could dominate a scene filled with taller men through sheer force of personality." This was particularly evident in The Maltese Falcon, where despite being dwarfed by most of the cast, his Sam Spade commands every frame. Warner Brothers executives initially worried about casting such a relatively short actor as their leading tough guy, but his electricity on screen quickly silenced those concerns. The studio's worries about his stature were ultimately buried under mountains of box office receipts. James Cagney. James Cagney packed more menace into his 5 feet 5 inches frame than actors twice his size. The scrappy star who defined gangster films for a generation was shorter than nearly every actress he worked with, requiring some of Hollywood's most creative height-hiding techniques. When paired with 5 feet 7 inches actress Joan Blondell in Footlight Parade, she famously had to stand in a hole while Cagney stood on a platform. Studio carpenters built special ramps that let him walk into scenes appearing taller than his female co-stars. Director Raoul Walsh once admitted, "Half our set budget went to building platforms for Jimmy to stand on." What Cagney lacked in height, he made up for in explosive energy. His rapid-fire delivery and tightly coiled physical presence made audiences forget he was looking up at everyone around him. His dynamic performance style, bouncing on his toes, snapping out lines, wasn't just acting technique, it was height compensation masterfully disguised as character work. Orson Welles called Cagney maybe the greatest actor who ever appeared in front of a camera, height be damned. The Academy agreed, awarding him an Oscar for Yankee Doodle Dandy despite him being nearly a foot shorter than some of his dancing partners in the film. When asked about his stature, Cagney famously quipped, "Height doesn't matter when you can punch faster than the other guy can see." Ironically, Cagney's compact build enhanced his tough guy credibility. Audiences loved watching the little guy take down much larger opponents, making him the perfect underdog hero during Depression-era America. His magnetism was so powerful that directors found leading ladies who were 5 feet 10 inches suddenly looking 5 feet 2 inches next to him, at least in viewers' perceptions. 4. Mickey Rooney. At a diminutive 5 feet 2 inches, and some sources argue even that measurement was generous, Mickey Rooney achieved the seemingly impossible, becoming Hollywood's #1 box office draw from 1939 to 1941, while being shorter than virtually every actress in the business. His height, or lack thereof, became such a defining characteristic that directors built entire sets scaled down to make him appear normal-sized. Rooney's most famous pairings were with Judy Garland, who herself stood only 4 feet 11 inches, making her one of the few actresses who didn't tower over him. Yet even with Garland, camera tricks were often employed. In their classic Let's Put on a Show musicals, Rooney would stand on hidden platforms during dance numbers, with set designers creating optical illusions that masked their similar heights. The actors' romantic scenes with taller actresses required impressive technical gymnastics. When paired with 5 feet 7 inches Ann Rutherford in the Andy Hardy series, she would often sit while he stood, or camera angles would catch her bending toward him. Rooney later confessed in his autobiography, "I didn't want to be short. I tried to make up for it by spending more money than I made and dating tall, beautiful women." Those tall, beautiful women included his first wife, the 5 feet 6 inches Ava Gardner, creating a 4-inch height gap that photographers struggled to disguise. During their brief marriage, studio publicity shots showed Gardner barefoot or seated while Rooney stood. Their height difference became tabloid fodder, with one columnist cruelly dubbing them Beauty and the Shrimp. Despite height challenges, Rooney's talent was undeniable. He earned 4 Academy Award nominations and received 2 special Oscars. Director Clarence Brown called him the closest thing to a genius I've ever worked with, proving talent didn't need to reach the top shelf to be recognized. Rooney himself eventually embraced his stature, joking, "I'm the only guy in Hollywood who stands under his reputation." 5. Fred Astaire. Fred Astaire may have made dancing look effortless, but making himself look taller than his partners required serious effort. Standing at 5 feet 9 inches, Astaire wasn't extremely short by average standards, but he frequently partnered with statuesque dancers who threatened to overtop him on screen. His most famous dance partner, Ginger Rogers, stood 5 feet 4 inches, but wore heels that boosted her to his eye level. To maintain his leading man status, Astaire employed lifts in his dancing shoes and insisted Rogers wear the lowest heels possible. The famous line about Rogers doing everything Astaire did backwards and in high heels ignores one detail. Those heels were specifically designed to be lower than standard dance shoes. When paired with the 5 feet 7 inches Rita Hayworth in You Were Never Lovelier, Astaire's costume included specially designed shoes with hidden 1.5-inch lifts. Studio documentation reveals that set designers would sometimes create slightly sloped dance floors, with Astaire positioned on the higher ground during key romantic moments. Cinematographer Rudolph Mattei developed special lighting techniques that stretched Astaire's shadow while minimizing his partners. Despite height concerns, Astaire's dancing created an illusion of exceptional height. Dance critic Arlene Croce noted, "When Astaire dances, he seems 7 feet tall." His elongated, elegant lines and perfect posture created a visual impression that transcended physical measurement. Director George Stevens once remarked, "Fred isn't tall, but he photographs tall because of how he carries himself." Astaire was famously self-conscious about his physique, once describing himself as skinny with big ears and feet. Yet he transformed these perceived flaws into his trademark style. His thin frame became elegance personified, and his oversized dress shoes became a fashion statement. The man who famously failed his first screen test with the note "can't act, can't sing, balding, can dance a little," proved that height was just another obstacle to overcome through sheer artistry. 6. Edward G. Robinson. Edward G. Robinson's imposing screen presence in gangster classics like Little Caesar made audiences forget he stood just 5 feet 5 inches. His iconic line, "Mother of Mercy, is this the end of Rico?" was actually delivered while standing on an apple box to match eye lines with his taller co-stars. Robinson's height challenges were so significant that Warner Bros. Developed specialized camera techniques just for him. The Robinson rule required actresses to remove their shoes in scenes with him while he wore custom-made elevator shoes. When paired with 5 feet 6 inches Joan Blondell in Bullets or Ballots, both costumes and set design were manipulated to minimize their height difference. What Robinson lacked in vertical inches, he made up for with one of Hollywood's most distinctive voices. His gravelly, intense delivery created such powerful intimidation that audiences perceived him as physically larger. Film historian Robert Sklar noted, "Robinson created such menace vocally that his physical stature became irrelevant." The actor's distinctive face also helped audiences overlook his height. His intense eyes and unique facial structure commanded attention, regardless of physical stature. Director John Huston once commented, "Eddie's face was worth a foot of height. You couldn't look away from him even when he was surrounded by giants." Unlike some shorter actors who bristled at height references, Robinson occasionally leaned into size jokes for comedy. In Key Largo, his gangster character Johnny Rocco delivers the memorable line, "Small-time guy can get just as dead as a big-time guy." This self-awareness endeared him to audiences and critics alike. Despite his stature, Robinson earned respect as one of the era's most versatile actors, moving between ruthless gangsters and sympathetic everymen with remarkable range. 7. Bing Crosby. Bing Crosby's smooth baritone voice helped audiences overlook that at 5 feet 7 inches, he was often shorter than his glamorous co-stars. When paired with the 5 feet 7 inches Grace Kelly in High Society, Kelly wore flat ballet slippers while Crosby's shoes contained custom-built 1-inch lifts. Paramount Pictures was so concerned about Crosby's height that they instituted the Crosby Protocol. No actress could wear heels exceeding 1 inch in his films. When tall actresses like 5 feet 9 inches Dorothy Lamour were cast opposite him, scenes were meticulously blocked to keep her seated while he stood or positioned on lower steps during walking scenes. When asked if he wished he were taller, Crosby displayed his trademark wit. "Sure, particularly when I'm with a tall leading lady. I could do with 6 feet very nicely." This self-deprecating humor endeared him to audiences who might otherwise have questioned his romantic lead status. Directors utilized Crosby's famous hats as a height enhancement trick. His signature fedoras added visual height while becoming his trademark style. Costume designers also employed vertical stripes and elongated suit cuts to create the illusion of greater stature on screen. Despite height challenges, Crosby became America's first multimedia superstar, dominating records, radio, and film simultaneously. His record sales exceeded 500 million, making him the best-selling recording artist of the 20th century. The Oscar-winning performer proved height had little correlation with cultural impact. Film critic Andrew Sarris once noted, "Crosby's voice made him 10 feet tall in America's imagination, regardless of what the measuring tape said." 8. Charles Boyer. French-born Charles Boyer brought European sophistication to Hollywood, but at 5 feet 9 inches, he needed help appearing taller than his glamorous co-stars. His most famous line, "Come with me to the Casbah," was delivered while standing on a hidden platform to match eye lines with 5 feet 7 inches Hedy Lamarr in Algiers. Boyer's romantic scenes with 5 feet 9 inches Ingrid Bergman in Gaslight required ingenious camera work. Director George Cukor employed forced perspective techniques borrowed from The Wizard of Oz, positioning Boyer slightly closer to the camera to make him appear larger. Set designers created sloped floors that gave Boyer a subtle height advantage in critical scenes. Unlike some actors who resented height enhancement techniques, Boyer embraced them as essential movie magic. He worked closely with cinematographers to develop flattering camera angles that elongated his frame. His trademark slicked-back hair and perfectly tailored suits created vertical lines that visually stretched his silhouette. Boyer's accented voice became his greatest asset, distracting audiences from height considerations. Film historian Janine Bassinger noted, Boyer's voice was so hypnotically seductive that women in the audience never questioned whether he needed elevator shoes. His intense, smoldering gaze similarly drew attention to his face rather than his stature. Despite height challenges, Boyer received 4 Academy Award nominations and became one of Hollywood's most sophisticated leading men. He famously rejected the stereotypical French lover typecast, developing complex, nuanced performances that transcended physical appearance. When a reporter once asked about his height compared to taller actresses, Boyer responded with characteristic European flair. In America, you measure men by inches. In France, we measure them by impact. 9. Claude Reigns. Claude Reigns may have been best known for playing the Invisible Man, but at 5 feet 6 inches, studios often wished they could make his height invisible too. When starring opposite 5 feet 7 inches Ingrid Bergman in Notorious, director Alfred Hitchcock employed his famous Reigns treatment, building a ramp that allowed Reigns to walk higher than Bergman during their scenes together. Reigns' vertical challenges were so significant that Warner Brothers created a specialized camera lens dubbed the Reigns Enlarger that slightly stretched his image vertically without distorting his width. When paired with 5 feet 8 inches Bette Davis in Mr. Skeffington, she famously wore flats while he stood on hidden platforms during their dramatic confrontations. What Reigns lacked in height, he compensated for with one of cinema's most commanding voices. His precise British diction and remarkable vocal control created such authority that audiences perceived him as physically imposing. Director Michael Curtis once remarked, Claude's voice adds 6 inches to his height on screen. Unlike many shorter actors who played tough guys, Reigns specialized in intellectual authority figures, politicians, doctors, and aristocrats whose power came from brains rather than brawn. This clever career strategy minimized height concerns while showcasing his extraordinary acting range. His Professor Higgins in Caesar and Cleopatra conveyed such intellectual dominance that his physical stature became irrelevant. Despite standing nearly half a foot shorter than the average leading man, Reigns earned 4 Academy Award nominations and created some of cinema's most memorable characters. Film critic David Thompson observed, Reigns proved that the greatest screen presence has nothing to do with physical size. It's about filling the frame with something unforgettable. His Captain Renault in Casablanca remains one of film's most beloved characters, proving that iconic status requires talent, not tape measurements. 10. Bob Hope. Bob Hope turned his modest 5 feet 10 inches height into a comedy asset, particularly when paired with glamorous actresses like 5 feet 9 inches Dorothy Lamour in the Road movies. When Lamour wore heels, Hope would humorously reference the height difference with lines like, I feel like I'm dating the Empire State Building. Paramount developed special Hope holes, subtle depressions in studio floors that allowed him to stand eye to eye with taller co-stars while appearing to be on level ground. When filming romantic scenes with 5 feet 7 inches Paulette Goddard in Nothing But the Truth, Hope wore custom shoes with 2-inch hidden lifts, which he called his Hollywood height enhancers. Unlike dramatic actors who concealed height assistance, Hope incorporated it into his comedy. In My Favorite Brunette, he delivers the line, I may be short but I'm thin, directly acknowledging his stature for laughs. This self-deprecating approach endeared him to audiences who appreciated his willingness to be the butt of his own jokes. Hope's physical comedy brilliantly disguised height issues. His exaggerated movements and rubbery facial expressions drew attention away from stature concerns. Director Norman Z. MacLeod once noted, Bob's face is so elastic and expressive that nobody cares how tall he stands. They're too busy laughing. Despite modest height, Hope became one of entertainment's most enduring stars, with a career spanning vaudeville, radio, television, and film across 7 decades. His extensive USO tours entertaining troops made him a national treasure regardless of physical measurements. As Hope himself joked late in life, I've been around so long, I've shrunk into proper proportion with my reputation. 11. John Garfield. John Garfield may have pioneered the brooding anti-hero archetype, but at a modest 5 feet 7 inches, he needed significant help appearing taller than his glamorous co-stars. When paired with 5 feet 6 inches Lana Turner in The Postman Always Rings Twice, Turner was forced to slouch and wear completely flat shoes while Garfield stood on hidden platforms. Warner Brothers invested in specialized Garfield risers, custom-built shoe inserts that added nearly 2 inches to his height without being visibly obvious. During his steamy scenes with 5 feet 7 inches Joan Crawford in Humoresque, the set was literally tilted at a subtle angle to create forced perspective that made Garfield appear taller than his co-star. Unlike some actors who bristled at height assistance, Garfield's working-class background made him pragmatic about these Hollywood tricks. As he once told director Vincent Sherman, "If standing on a box makes the picture better, I'll stand on a damn box." This no-nonsense attitude extended to his performances, which brought unprecedented gritty realism to the screen. What Garfield lacked in height, he compensated for with explosive intensity. Film historian David Thompson noted, Garfield created such emotional voltage on screen that physical measurements became irrelevant. His smoldering performances in films like Body and Soul made female viewers ignore any height discrepancies with his leading ladies. Despite his modest stature, Garfield became a pioneering figure in Hollywood. His refusal to name names during the McCarthy-era blacklist showed a moral stature far exceeding his physical height. Though his career and life were cut tragically short at 39, his influence towered over subsequent generations of method actors. As Marlon Brando once said, Garfield showed us all how to be real on screen. Everything I know about truth in acting, I learned from watching him. 12. Paul Mooney. Paul Mooney stood just 5 feet 7 inches, but became Hollywood's most respected character actor through sheer transformative talent. When starring opposite 5 feet 6 inches Bette Davis in Border Town, Mooney wore 2-inch lifts, while Davis was instructed to walk in a slight crouch during their shared scenes. Warner Brothers was so concerned about Mooney's height that they created special Mooney marks on set floors, subtle indicators showing exactly where he should stand, to maximize forced perspective advantages. When paired with 5 feet 8 inches Luis Rayner in The Good Earth, cinematographer Carl Freund employed innovative lighting techniques that cast elongated shadows behind Mooney to create the illusion of greater height. Unlike many actors who relied on a consistent screen persona, Mooney disappeared so completely into his roles that audiences forgot physical considerations entirely. His transformation into Mexican revolutionary Benito Juarez required extensive makeup that actually made him appear shorter on screen, a testament to his commitment to authenticity over vanity. Mooney's remarkable voice became his greatest height equalizer. His vocal control was so precise that director William Dieterle once remarked, "When Paul speaks, he grows 3 inches in the audience's perception." This commanding presence helped him portray historical giants like Louis Pasteur and Émile Zola despite his modest stature. Despite height challenges, Mooney earned unprecedented respect, winning an Academy Award and receiving 5 additional nominations. The actor's dedication to his craft was so intense that fellow actors called him the actor's actor. Jack Warner, who signed many taller, more conventionally handsome leading men, admitted, "An inch of Mooney is worth a foot of any other actor on our lot." His legacy of transformative performances established that greatness in acting transcends physical limitations. 13. Spencer Tracy. Spencer Tracy may have been Hollywood's most respected actor, but at 5 feet 9 inches, he needed considerable assistance, appearing taller than his frequent co-star Katharine Hepburn, who stood 5 feet 7 inches and wore heels that boosted her to nearly 5 feet 10 inches. Their classic pairing in Adam's Rib required Tracy to stand on hidden platforms during key confrontational scenes. MGM developed what became known as the Tracy treatment, a combination of camera angles, costume adjustments, and set designs specifically created to enhance his stature on screen. When filming Woman of the Year, their first film together, Hepburn famously wore flats, while Tracy's shoes contained custom 1.5-inch lifts, which he referred to as his Hollywood equalizers. Unlike some actors who resented height enhancement techniques, Tracy approached them with his characteristic no-nonsense attitude. He once told director George Cukor, "I don't care if I'm standing on the Empire State Building as long as the scene works." This pragmatic approach to filmmaking extended to his naturalistic acting style, which emphasized truth over glamour. What Tracy lacked in height, he made up for with an unmistakable screen presence. Film critic Pauline Kael noted, "Tracy doesn't need height, he has gravity." His intense focus and minimal approach to acting created such authenticity that physical considerations became secondary to his performance's emotional impact. Despite height challenges, Tracy earned 9 Academy Award nominations and won 2 consecutive Best Actor Oscars. His influence on subsequent generations of actors was immense, with stars from Marlon Brando to Tom Hanks citing him as their primary influence. As his longtime partner Katharine Hepburn once said after his death, "He wasn't tall, but somehow he made you think he was." The fact that their 25-year relationship endured despite their height differential proved that true connection transcends physical measurements. 14. Richard Widmark. Richard Widmark terrorized audiences as the giggling psychopath Tommy Udo in Kiss of Death, but at just 5 feet 9 inches, he needed significant help appearing intimidating next to his female co-stars. When working with 5 feet 7 inches Gene Tierney in Night in the City, director Jules Dassin employed what he called the Widmark workaround, positioning Tierney in slight depressions on set floors to minimize their height difference. 20th Century Fox invested in specialized camera lenses nicknamed Widmark Wideners that slightly stretched his vertical presence without distorting his width. When paired with 5 feet 8 inches Linda Darnell in No Way Out, costume designers put Widmark in specially crafted shoes with nearly 2-inch hidden lifts, while Darnell was restricted to completely flat footwear. Unlike some actors who resented height enhancement techniques, Widmark cleverly incorporated height compensation into his characterizations. His trademark nervous energy, twitchy movements, and sudden explosions of violence created such psychological intimidation that physical stature became irrelevant. As director Samuel Fuller noted, "Dick could terrify you with a glance. Who cares how tall he stood?" Widmark's distinctive voice became his greatest height equalizer. His ability to shift from a chilling whisper to an unhinged laugh created such vocal dominance that audiences perceived him as physically imposing. Film historian Eddie Muller observed, "Widmark's voice had more range than most actors' entire performances." Despite modest height, Widmark created some of cinema's most memorable villains before successfully transitioning to heroic roles in films like Panic in the Streets. Though he received only 1 Academy Award nomination, his influence on subsequent generations of screen antagonists was immense. Directors from Martin Scorsese to Quentin Tarantino have cited his performances as foundational to their understanding of on-screen menace. As Widmark himself once joked late in life, "I spent most of my career scaring people while standing on a box." 15. Danny Kaye. Danny Kaye became a comedy sensation despite standing just 5 feet 10 inches alongside significantly taller leading ladies. When paired with 5 feet 9 inches Virginia Mayo in The Secret Life of Walter Mitty, Mayo wore ballet flats while Kaye's shoes contained custom 1.5-inch lifts, which he called his Hollywood helpers. Paramount Pictures developed specialized Kaye corrections, subtle camera techniques that minimized height disparities between Kaye and his co-stars. When performing alongside 5 feet 7 inches Vera Ellen in White Christmas, director Michael Curtis positioned Kaye on slightly raised platforms during their dance numbers to create height parity. Unlike dramatic actors who tried to hide height enhancement, Kaye brilliantly incorporated physical comedy that made height irrelevant. His rubbery facial expressions, lightning-fast patter songs, and frenetic physical energy created such visual dynamism that audiences never focused on stature comparisons. Choreographer Bob Fosse noted, "Danny's body was like elastic. He could stretch, contract, and move in ways that defied normal human proportions. What Kaye lacked in height, he compensated for with perhaps the most versatile performance style in Hollywood history. His ability to shift between accents, characters, and emotions at lightning speed created such a whirlwind of entertainment that physical measurements became meaningless." Director Howard Hawks once commented, "Danny doesn't need height. He has more talent in his little finger than most actors have in their entire bodies." Despite height challenges, Kaye became one of entertainment's most beloved figures, receiving an honorary Academy Award and multiple Emmys. His humanitarian work with UNICEF showed that his stature as a human being far exceeded any physical measurements. As fellow performer Bing Crosby once quipped, "Danny may be average height, but there's nothing average about anything else he does." 16. Peter Lorre. Peter Lorre created some of cinema's most disturbing villains despite standing just 5 feet 5 inches alongside much taller actresses. When working with 5 feet 7 inches Mary Astor in The Maltese Falcon, director John Huston employed what became known as the Lorre leveler, positioning Astor in subtle depressions, while Lorre stood on raised platforms hidden from camera view. Warner Brothers invested in specialized lighting techniques that exaggerated Lorre's shadow, creating an elongated, menacing presence that extended far beyond his physical frame. When paired with 5 feet 8 inches Lauren Bacall into Have and Have Not, costume designers put Lorre in shoes with 2-inch hidden lifts, while Bacall was restricted to completely flat footwear. Unlike some actors who tried to compensate for height with aggressive machismo, Lorre brilliantly leveraged his size into unsettling characterizations. His soft, hypnotic voice created such psychological discomfort that physical intimidation became unnecessary. Director Fritz Lang, who launched Lorre's career in M, noted, "Peter doesn't frighten you with size. He crawls inside your mind and terrifies you from within." Lorre's distinctive eyes became his greatest asset, drawing attention away from height considerations. His bulging, unblinking gaze created such hypnotic intensity that audiences focused exclusively on his face. Film critic Roger Ebert later wrote, "Lorre's eyes contain more menace than most actors achieve with their entire bodies." Despite significant height challenges, Lorre created some of cinema's most unforgettable characters across multiple genres. Though he received no Academy Award nominations, his influence on psychological portrayal of villainy was immense. Directors from Alfred Hitchcock to David Lynch have cited his performances as revolutionary. As Humphrey Bogart once said of his frequent co-star, "Peter may be the shortest guy on set, but when the camera rolls, he's the biggest thing on the screen." 17. Ray Milland. Ray Milland projected sophisticated charm despite standing 5 feet 9 inches alongside statuesque leading ladies. When paired with 5 feet 7 inches, Grace Kelly in Dial M for Murder, director Alfred Hitchcock employed his famous Miland manipulation, using forced perspective techniques that positioned Miland slightly closer to the camera to create the illusion of greater height. Paramount Pictures invested in specialized Miland markers, subtle indicators on set floors showing exactly where he should stand to maximize height advantages through camera positioning. When working with 5 feet 9 inches Jane Wyman in The Lost Weekend, costume designers created suits with elongated vertical lines for Miland, while Wyman wore flats instead of her usual heels. Unlike some actors who bristled at height assistance, Miland approached these techniques with the same refined professionalism that characterized his performances. He once told cinematographer John Seitz, "Whatever makes the film better is fine by me. This business is about creating illusions after all." This sophisticated perspective helped him portray debonair characters despite modest stature. What Miland lacked in height, he compensated for with exceptional versatility and precise technique. His Academy Award-winning performance in The Lost Weekend demonstrated such harrowing psychological deterioration that physical considerations became entirely secondary. Director Billy Wilder noted, "Ray doesn't need physical presence. He has something much rarer, absolute control of his instrument." Despite height challenges, Miland enjoyed one of Hollywood's longest and most varied careers, transitioning from romantic leads to psychological dramas to horror films over 5 decades. His remarkable range proved that lasting star power comes from adaptability rather than physical measurements. As co-star Marlene Dietrich once observed, "Ray carries himself with such conviction that you never question whether he belongs in the frame. He simply commands it." Hollywood's golden age wasn't just built by towering figures like John Wayne and Gary Cooper. These shorter stars proved that charisma, talent, and sheer determination could overcome any height obstacle. Their platforms, trenches, and camera tricks might seem desperate by today's standards, but they created movie magic that still captivates us decades later. What do you think? Could today's height-obsessed Hollywood learn something from these compact legends? Would Alan Ladd or Mickey Rooney even get cast as leading men in 2025? Share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to like and subscribe for more hidden Hollywood history. Remember, in the movies, it's not about how tall you stand, but how large you live on screen.